Picture a giant block of ice sitting in a freezing room. The temperature rests exactly at -5 degrees Celsius. Look at this thermometer. As you start warming the room, -4, -3, -2, -1, you are actively adding heat and putting in energy. But looking at the ice, nothing happens. It remains completely solid. Then the room hits 0 degrees. A tiny shift occurs. Water begins to pool, and a single drop runs down the side. That melting point was not triggered solely by that last degree of heat. It was the physical result of all the invisible energy accumulated during the previous 5 degrees. Meet Alex. Every morning, he wakes up exhausted, scrolling his phone in the dark, pushing his dream of writing a book to another day. To break the cycle, he decides to overhaul everything immediately. He commits to 2 hours of heavy lifting at the gym and writing 10 pages every single night. By day 3, the physical and mental exhaustion compounds. His energy crashes, the pages stay blank, and he quits entirely. Alex assumes he lacks discipline, but his early failure has nothing to do with willpower. He fell into a trap of design, relying on massive, exhausting bursts of action instead of building a self-sustaining system. To actually change his behavior, Alex has to discard his primary target. Setting an ambitious goal, like writing a bestseller, is essentially useless. Every author, published or unpublished, shares that exact same goal. Trying to force an external achievement turns the daily work into an exhausting chore. The friction remains high because the person doing the work hasn't changed. The alternative is to shift focus entirely away from the outcome and onto the identity. Instead of saying, "I want to write a book," the objective becomes, "I am a writer." With that framework, every tiny choice stops being an agonizing test of endurance. Choosing to write for 10 minutes instead of scrolling social media simply casts a vote, proving to yourself that this new identity is real. Internal alignment requires external support. The physical environment has to be engineered so that the easiest action to take is the right one. If a journal is buried under laundry while the TV remote sits directly on the pillow, the environment is rigged against the habit. By placing the notebook directly on the laptop keyboard and leaving the phone in another room, the cue to write becomes impossible to ignore. You can apply this same engineering to habits you actively dislike through a process called temptation bundling. If the thought of core exercises sounds miserable, you bind it to something highly rewarding. You allow yourself to listen to your favorite podcast strictly during that workout. The resistance drops because you have made the physical effort a mandatory requirement for the entertainment. When your physical space naturally pulls you toward the correct action, you stop having to rely on motivation entirely. Even with a perfectly designed room, the brain resists intense effort. Committing to a grueling 60-minute workout or a 10-page chapter feels like staring up at a sheer cliff face. To bypass that resistance, you shrink the scale of the habit using the 2-minute rule. You don't commit to reading a book a week, you commit to reading 1 page tonight. You don't vow to run 5 miles, you just put on your running shoes and step outside. It sounds ridiculously simple, but that is exactly the point. You have to establish the physical habit of showing up. A behavior must be standardized in its absolute smallest form before you can ever optimize it. The remaining obstacle is simple biology. Human brains are wired to crave immediate rewards, but the physical and mental payoffs of a good habit often take months to materialize. To survive that initial period of invisible progress, you have to artificially manufacture an immediate sense of satisfaction. One of the most effective ways is visual tracking. Every day you complete your 2-minute habit, you mark a large red X on a physical wall calendar. Take a look at this progress graph. Early on, the trajectory is flat. Your objective is simply keeping the chain of X's alive. Over time, these daily marks accumulate. You push past the flat line, and the invisible work hits critical mass, curving sharply upward. Gamifying the consistency overrides your brain's impatience. It ensures you keep showing up long enough for the real results to compound. The block of ice finally melts into a fast-moving, self-sustaining stream. A year later, Alex isn't waking up exhausted. By focusing strictly on micro-adjustments and environmental design, his book is finished, his energy is high, and he never had to burn himself out to get there. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Drop the massive leaps. Pick one atomic-sized system to implement today, and hit subscribe to cast a vote for the person you want to become.